All right. Hey, good morning. What's happening? Robert Phoenix back on the case here today. Another kind of Arctic style day here in Fredericksburg. And wow, there's so much happening. So much happening. I could probably just dive into things for the next 3 hours, but I'm going to try to keep it fairly condensed, try to get in at an hour 15, maybe hour 20 max. So, yeah. Get ready, buckle up. We got some turbulence in front of us, and of course, we're going to talk about Tony Bobulinski and his appearance last night on Tucker Carlson, and what my thoughts are. And number one, why I think he's relevant. Number two, why I believe he's telling the truth. And number three, how he got there. And the number three is really, really important. I'm also going to talk about what's happening in Philadelphia because it is going off in Philadelphia. And the cops are powerless to do anything at this point. This is clearly a situation where civil rights are being violated. Trump could call in the 14th Amendment, and he could send in troops. He could nationalize or deputize the state police there. He's not going to do it. And part of it has to do with the fact that I don't think he can at this point. I really don't think he can. I think Trump has handcuffs on him, not literal handcuffs, but proverbial handcuffs. And ever since he declared a state of emergency, people have to realize that he is not controlling the country at this point. You know, he basically has let the states do whatever they want. When he declared that state of emergency, the states have taken control. And he says that. He says, well, not every state is going to handle it the same, or not every state has the same kinds of cases or same kinds of levels of co-infection or whatever, right? And to some extent, that's true. And what we've seen is the rise of more localized tyranny. And I believe it's part of this de-Balkanization or the Balkanization program as the United States becomes fragmented and is really no longer united. And all Trump has to do is to undo the state of national emergency. Now, one would hope that once he's elected, that he will take that step, right? That he would say, okay, I'm in now. I'm in for another however long, 4 years if he's elected. And that he would essentially remove that state of emergency. When he does that, guess what happens? All their power reverts back to the executive branch, and he could then have a national response. That's all that needs to happen. They keep saying open it up back. Oh, it's like he's putting the onus back in the states. Like, you better open up. You better open up. Well, you're the president, or theoretically you will be the president. You can change that, and all you have to do is rescind that order. It's that simple. It is that simple. Okay, so we have a situation in Philadelphia where it's getting very, very ugly, and they're going through a series of coordinated attacks combined with anarchic outbursts of people joining in because they feel like there is a kill shot moment happened in Philadelphia, in another urban area, in a city I really like and have spent a lot of time kind of hanging out. And I know people in Philadelphia in the surrounding area, and they need to be concerned. And they need to be concerned about what's happening there with the mayor of Philadelphia, with the DA in Philadelphia, with their own mayor in the state of Pennsylvania. This is significant. And Pennsylvania is a very, very big state. It's I'm not sure where it ranks. I think it's like top 10, maybe top 5 in terms of size. It's a big state. And so Western Pennsylvania is a very, very different environment than Philly, which is closer to New Jersey and in New York. And you get into Western Pennsylvania and you're dealing with a culture that has a lot of guns. It's a hunting culture. So, it's not as if there couldn't be a localized response. And I think this is where people are going to have to cross the line at some point. Like if this continues, even after Trump is elected, people in Western Pennsylvania are theoretically going to have to think about like protecting other areas of their state. If that's not happening, if the National Guard or the state police and it's clear that the police in Philadelphia, I mean, I have a piece of video where they're literally running away. They're running away. And the thing that's weird about the video is that they're not even really dressed in riot squad gear. They're dressed in blue shirts and caps. It's like they have nothing. They have nothing. They have nothing to protect them. They're like naked prey. They're like Cornell Wilde in that movie, The Naked Prey. Have you guys ever seen The Naked Prey? It's a pretty intense movie, man. It's a very intense movie. It's actually one of my favorite movies of all time. And essentially, these are colonialist soldiers in England, and they're captured by one of the local tribes. And they basically set them free. Cornell Wilde and a couple of other of the officers, they set them free. And then they go after them. Right? It's a very intense movie. And Cornell Wilde eventually kind of evades being captured. But that's what the cops were, it was probably more like that movie, what is it, Shaka Zulu with Michael Caine and how they're trying to defend the fort. And they have wave after wave after wave of these Zulu warriors coming in and just completely like overrunning this small outpost that was supposed to, somehow maintain their footprints in a certain part of Africa. And it's interesting because the movie that I'm talking about came out right around the same time that this idea of decolonization was being bandied about, in Africa. And I talked about that before. And, there was this whole nationalist movement in Africa during the 1970s, 60s and 1970s. And in a lot of ways, on paper, it looked really good. It's like, okay, we're going to get out. The French leave Algeria, the Portuguese leave Mozambique. Ultimately the English theoretically leave Rhodesia, at least northern Rhodesia, which becomes Zambia. So, but on paper, it looked good and sounded good. But really, what it did was create a lot of chaos. And then you had intertribal conflicts. You had, local strongmen taking power. Not knowing where or how to manage the local resources, taking loans from the IMF because their country is going broke. Then all of a sudden you see the multinationals move in. You see the NGOs move in. It was clearly a very strategic program to replace a statist form of control with a corporate form of control. So it was all a bunch of feel good on the surface, but at the end of the day, the people of Africa continued to lose. And in fact, I'll say something controversial, they may have had a better chance of actually surviving and even thriving with some form of colonialist or European representation, and even if it was for an agreed upon amount of time, right? It's like, okay, here we go. We're going to give you guys theoretically back your country, but we need to make sure that you have everything in place. Like you need to have the infrastructure in place. You need to have the leadership in place. We need to have a real transition plan. And this transition plan is going to last 10 years. And that would have been reasonable. That would have been a reasonable thing to do. But that's not what happened. And it was like they were flipping the switches very quickly, and it gained an incredible amount of momentum. And part of the reason why is because the Soviets and the Chinese and the North Koreans also wanted to get their hooks in Africa as well. And there's always been an internecine connection between socialism/communism and the governments of the world, particularly Western Europe. So I'm sure there was some degree of cooperation tacit yet covert cooperation between the superpowers in order to kind of open up the sort of the playing board in Africa, so to speak. And I've talked about Rhodesia, and I want to get back there because there's so much to talk about. Because a lot of what's happened in Rhodesia is happening right now, and that's really what took place in Rhodesia. And Ian Smith, who was the leader of Rhodesia, was desperately trying to carve out a plan so that Rhodesia could make this transition without it being like really abrupt, and all of a sudden, the services, the power, the infrastructure is put at risk, and it was. And what's interesting about Ian Smith is he continued to live in Rhodesia even after Robert Mugabe became the leader or the dictator of Rhodesia. He continued to live there. He didn't leave, but when there was a transitional government, it didn't last very long. And Mugabe comes in because the globalists wanted Mugabe in there. The communists wanted Mugabe in there. And Mugabe was working directly with the Chinese and the North Koreans. Joshua Nkomo, who was the other, I think there was Zapu and ZANU. There were the two groups. They basically were representing two different tribal affiliations. And Joshua Nkomo was the other guy who was trying to vie for the leadership of Rhodesia / Zimbabwe, and he was actually backed by the Soviets. And both of them had very, very different plans. Robert Mugabe was a Maoist, and he was an avowed Maoist. That's what he went to Ghana, and that's where he studied Maoism and the doctrine of Mao. He was also educated by the English. So a lot of these so-called African leaders had Western educations. Probably the most notorious, although he was not a leader, he was certainly a revolutionary, was Frantz Fanon. And Frantz Fanon was educated in the schools of, I believe, France, if I'm not mistaken. And his doctrine of radical overthrow became an inspiration for Barack Obama. So a lot of these so-called leaders of Africa were actually educated and indoctrinated in Western ideology, but the Western ideology, or the prevailing Western ideology in Europe, and particularly in England, was socialism. And if you look at the spy networks that were really kind of a scandalous time in Europe, and particularly England, in the 1960s and the 70s, where people like Guy Burgess and Kim Philby, I mean, these people were just out and out communist spies. And in the case of Kim Philby, he was a spy for a very, very long time. And if you really drill down into that story, you can see where he was enabled again and again and again by the State Department inside of the House of Commons, Parliament. He was also enabled by MI5. They allowed him to do what he was doing. They knew he was a spy. The guy that he reported to knew he was a spy. And Kim Philby winds up going to Beirut for the better part of a decade and continues to funnel information to the Soviets. And the reason why is because they believed that the Soviets were the response, that they could take care of fascism, right? They saw fascism and they saw Hitler and they saw the kind of the ravages of World War II, and that the only kind of local support or local antidote to fascism was Stalin, because Stalin defeated the Germans, right? So, anytime they felt or thought that there was this kind of malevolent or very aggressive energy, they began to embrace this idea that communism was going to be, their panacea. Their it would be the thing that would save them, right? It'd be their panacea, the thing that would, pump the brakes on fascism and create a social structure of fairness and justice and equality. And really all Kim Philby did was go to Beirut and drink his fucking ass off. That's all he did for about the better part of 10 years. And one of Kim Philby's friends, or the people that would entertain the Philbys all the time, was Stuart Copeland's father, who was working for the CIA in Beirut. And so they would have Kim Philby and his wife over all the time, and they'd get shit-faced, and they'd get all kinds of state secrets and leak it back to the CIA. So, this is what was going on. And so there was this, very internecine relationship with socialism and communism with Western Europe in the 1960s and 70s, and that actually kind of manifests in Africa. And the idea of decolonialization, because these powers, whether they're sort of the Sino-Asian powers or the transnational corporate powers, want to get their hooks into Africa, the resources. They want to keep Africa in a perpetual state of chaos, which is what they've done. They've done a pretty good job of that. And that's what happened when Mugabe takes over. The thing that Mugabe feared the most happened. And 17% of the white minority, which at that time was about 250,000 people, left. And they went to South Africa. Little did they know that eventually they would run into the same kinds of international and local pressures that the Rhodesians, a very different government and a very different kind of system than the Rhodesians. But that 17% of the 250,000, population, it was significant. And those people were engineers and farmers. And Mugabe ran the country right into the ground. He started seizing properties. And there was a lot of violence and a lot of bloodshed and a lot of murder under the Mugabe regime. And it wasn't just whites that were suffering at the brutality of Robert Mugabe. It was also Zimbabweans who had a different idea about the government and how they wanted the government to represent them. And again, you have intertribal conflicts, in that area, and that takes place too. And it's a reign of terror is what happens. It's a total reign of terror. And, that area, Zimbabwe, has finally begun to sort of, be stabilized. Mugabe lived for fucking ever. And the Chinese they ultimately got what they wanted. The Chinese play a long game. The Russians play a long game. And they got what they wanted. And they were able to stabilize Zimbabwe, because they were able to actually get in and start to, work with the agriculture, which is significant because Rhodesia was the breadbasket of Africa. It was really an amazing place when it came to agriculture and food. So it is the Chinese ultimately who win out in Zimbabwe. And the Chinese have been, of course, been in Africa for the better part of the last 20 years, particularly in Central Africa, where they have been mining the rare earth minerals that make up the guts of this thing right here. So by decolonizing, what happened was that it opened the door and opened the opportunity for these other entities to come in and then begin to exploit an always chaotic situation. So, a lot of people think that was a great idea. And ultimately, I think it was a good idea, but the strategy and the implementation around it was horrible, because it left these governments, these so-called governments in the infrastructure, in very vulnerable positions. And of course, they were exploited, 100%. And it's happening now. This is what's happening here in this country. And this is why I've been talking about Rhodesia, because I think it's important. And they're using very similar tactics that they use in Rhodesia and in South Africa. And of course, it's quite easy in Rhodesia because there was a white minority who essentially was running the government, right? Was running the country, because they pretty much built the country. And it was like, you can't do this. I mean, there are 4.5 million, Rhodesians or Zimbabweans, and there's 250,000 of you, and, you can't do that. So there was immense pressure on the international community for them to change. Now, they they decoupled from England, but when they decoupled from England, nobody would recognize them. And there are all these trade sanctions against them. They had a very, very difficult time. Ian Smith knew this. And Ian Smith was actually working with Joshua Nkomo. He wanted to work with Nkomo, and it was Nkomo was influenced by a very, very different entity. He was influenced by a guy by the name of Henry George, who is a kind of an important American that a lot of people don't know about. And let me do the invocation. Let me say hi to some people. I'm going to show you Henry George's Wikipedia page and why he's important and why his ideas influenced Joshua Nkomo. And Nkomo was much less of a collectivist and a Maoist than Mugabe was. And so he was probably a better fit than Mugabe, but it's Mugabe ultimately who wins out in Rhodesia. Let me say hi to some people. Let's see who do we have here. All right, we got Danica Rose. She's here. Sandra, hey, what's up, cuz? Double V in the house. And we got VV and Double V. Awesome. WC Ray, what's happening? Justice Moody, the Ouija Dragon Moon. There's Tizia. Tizia, I'm going to send you something today. Uncle Glenn, my man in the house. Dorothy Edwards. There she is. What's going on, Dorothy? Joe Mama. Let's see who else we have here. Natasha Lloyd. What's going on, Natasha? Do we see Judy? Is Judy in here today? Let's see. Natasha says, where is she? Hello, Miss Judy. Okay. All right. Cheryl. Hi, Cheryl. Looking good on that vacation picture, Cheryl, by the way. Susie, what's happening? Maurice in the house. Charles Mazak. Amazing synchronicity on the 26th Hillary Clinton's birthday anniversary. Patriot Act signed into law. Supreme Court confirmed 66 days left in the year. Oh, how about that? Yeah, wow, interesting. Good synchronicity. Thanks for bringing that up, Charles. Coach K, on terror, they're trying to pass a bill that makes the government immune to lawsuits due to harm from COVID lockdowns and restrictions. We have an MP who's exposing them. Good. You better say your prayers for that MP if it's a man or a woman. Who knows? Hi, Tamara. What's going on? Judy is here. Good. Excellent. Let's see. Who else do we have? There's Lils, Vivi, Charles again. Michael R. What's happening? Apologies for missing live episodes last week or so. It's okay, man. You can always catch me on the rebound. You know, you can always see the video. There's the lovely and talented Joan. That's Lord E. Sonia K. What's happening? Mr. Cruz, my man Johnny. Lisa Marie, there she is. Let's see, introspective woodworker, Ryan, hanging out in Amish country with the Amish Mafia. Ian Barber in the house. Let's see, who else? Have I missed anybody? Let's see, Michael C. What's going on, brother? Good to see you. JMP. Yeah, JMP, you better take care of yourself out there. Be safe. Be safe. That you are near the edge of the cyclonic force that is building. Craig Corporon, good to see you, Craig. Carolina, what's happening, Carolina? Good to see you. Mary Black, Sovereign Human checking in. Beautiful. Double M in the house. Let's see who else do we have. There's my man, Thor by the door. Z is here. Ani, I'm going to call you today. I promise. Yesterday I got super busy, man. I had so many readings yesterday. It was crazy. Kestrel sends her greetings. Good. Okay, she's on the road to be with family. All right. Well, Kestrel, we wish you all the best. Have a safe journey. Beth Berry's here. David Olmstead. What's happening, David? Nice to see you, big guy. Christy Daniels. There's Eve. All the way from Norway. Love it. A non-EU country, by the way. Christine, looking forward to speaking with you, hanging out with you a little bit. All right. I think we are all here. There's Judy. I think we're all here. All right. Let's get all invocated. And here we go. Dear blessed and holy Mother, Father God of the great central sun, which is the universal sun, the universal light, which is the light of Yeshua, Sananda, Emmanuel. We ask that only the highest and best information, wisdom, and truth come through this channel at this time. And as a result, we are all blessed by the qualities of grace, humor, lightness, flexibility, courage, faith, commitment, fortitude, strength, heart, intelligence, higher mind, patience, compassion, empathy, and above all, love. We ask that any karmic residue be cleansed, clarified, purified, and removed from this stream right now. Okay, here we go. I want to show you. I've had this up on my screen now for about a week, and we're gonna jump into a lot of stuff today. We're gonna get into Hunter Biden shit. I mean, so there's a lot to break down, but I need to finish up some of the Rhodesia stuff, and I need to show you Henry George, who's a very important person, and one of the most important Americans that you've never really heard about or know much about. So before I do that, I just want to introduce you to Joshua Nkomo. And this was Robert Mugabe's rival. They wound up actually joining forces because they had a common enemy together, which was the Smith government and the SAS, the the Rhodesian bushfighters, who were total badasses and actually were beating back Nkomo and Mugabe's Russian, Chinese, and North Korean backed forces. They were actually winning the war on the ground. Kind of legendary. You know, they say that whenever the communists decide that they want to flip a country, that they're really have a great track record of doing it. And they do, by the way. But if they had the right political forces at a higher level backing them, Rhodesia would have had a much better transitional government. And communists would not have won. And they did. Mugabe came in, and again, backed by the Chinese. This was the government that they got. But Nkomo is a different guy in a lot of ways. Mugabe's a Pisces, and Nkomo is, if I'm mistaken, he's a Gemini. So he had, I think, just astrologically more of a ability to kind of juggle, two different worlds. He could sort of work with a particular model that was already sort of pre-existing, but he had his own collectivist ideas. He's a trade union leader. That gives you some insight right there. He was president of the banned National Democratic Party. So we have ZAPU, and then they have the splinter rival ZANU, who was created and led by Mugabe. So they had two opposing parties. They eventually had to join together. But then ultimately what happens is that, again, Mugabe winds up taking over Rhodesia. And so he went to London. So let's see, what do we have here? His father, Thomas Nyangolo Letswanso Nkomo, worked as a preacher and a cattle rancher and worked at the London Missionary School. After he completed his primary education in southern Rhodesia, Nkomo took a carpentry course at the Slotosho Government Industrial School and studied there for a year before becoming a driver. He later tried animal husbandry, then became a school teacher. So obviously you can see Gemini at work here. He can do a lot of different things. Then he specializes in carpentry at the Manayame School in Kezi. In 1942, at the age of 25, during his career as a teacher, he decided he should go to South Africa to further his education, do carpentry, and qualify to a higher level. He attended Adams College and the Jan H. Hofmeyr School of Social Work in South Africa. There he meets Nelson Mandela and other future nationalist leaders at the University of Fort Hare, though he did not attend that university. It was at the Jan Hofmeyr School of Social Work. He was awarded a diploma in social work in 1952. So again, sort of being educated in the Western tradition. And of course, they're being groomed. They're being groomed, right? Nelson Mandela is being groomed Joshua Nkomo is being groomed, and social work. The word social, which is really the kind of the root of socialism, is part of the nexus. Okay, so what's interesting is again, he has a different kind of philosophy moving forward for for Rhodesia, and he believes in this idea of Georgism, which is about the principles of collecting ground rent, but leaving improvements to those who built them, which is kind of interesting. So it's like a land tax, and so this is an interest. So this is what set him apart from Mugabe, because Mugabe wants everything. Mugabe wants to run the whole thing. He wants all the resources. We don't believe in trading land or selling land. No. And in any government that I lead, you can be certain those practices must go. So there's no ownership here with the land per se. That does not mean we will be taking people's land, which is interesting. It means that other people who haven't got the money will have a chance to use land, which is the common property of everybody. And if they have to pay some rates or rents, that will go to a general fund of the people. In this way, citizens can use as much land as they want. Our system is this: once you use the land, that land belongs to you. You have not bought it. You cannot sell it to someone. The land belongs to the people, but everything on that land is yours. It's kind of an interesting concept. And so the Georgist philosophy, or Georgism, is the foundation for a lot of ideas around a version of collectivism. And I know Squirrel's probably going out of her mind if she's watching this. But it was also, in modern times, geoism. It's the single tax movement. It's an economic ideology holding that while people should own the value they produce themselves, the economic rent derived from land, including all natural resources, and the commons should belong equally to members of society. So instead of the money going to the person that owns the land, for instance, it goes into this general fund. So if you are on the land, it's kind of like Mexico in some ways. Like we have a 99-year lease or something like that. So if you're on the land, like you can make improvements, you can do what you want, but ultimately you don't really own it. But that doesn't mean that the state owns it, right? So it's a very different sort of place than where Mugabe was coming from. Mugabe was the state owns everything. Here, the land can be used, and the money that is derived from the rent of the land or the tax of the land goes into a general fund and theoretically helps people, right? So Georgism is concerned with the distribution of economic rent caused by natural monopolies, pollution, and control of commons, including title of ownership. To be honest with you, nobody really owns their land anyway. I mean, if you stop paying your property taxes, what's going to happen? It takes you probably about 90 days, 120 days. And guess what? The state or the city or the county or a combination of all three will put a lien on your property. So the idea of ownership in and of itself, as we now experience here in this country, is a complete and utter illusion. It's an illusion. You think even if you pay your house off, you don't have the actual deed. You may have the deed, but you don't have the title, right? So there's a whole, and we'll talk to Russell J. Gould about this tomorrow, and we'll get into some of this stuff, right? So Henry George is the guy that is sort of the progenitor of this idea, right? And we'll get into him right here. So he's a Virgo. Now, the thing about Henry George is, speaking of Philadelphia, the thing about Henry George is that his model, he is like the godfather of the progressive movement. So there it is, the progressive era right there. So it's a period of widespread social activism, political reform across the United States that spanned the 1890s and 1920s. And of course, the 1920s is the 100-year march towards socialism, collectivism, and communism. We've looked at that, and here we are. We're at the end game of the 100-year march. So his most famous book is Progress and Poverty. So he's looking at a lot of different things. He's looking about value tax, anti-monopolyism. He's a Virgo. He wants to solve problems. The one thing that he's a journalist, by the way. That's how he gets into the game. The one thing that he really contributed to American society is the secret ballot. And today, how we vote, right, is the secret ballot, meaning that you have a right to cast a vote, theoretically, in privacy, unless, of course, you live in Texas and you live in an old folks' home and somebody comes by and basically coerces you to change your vote, which is happening right now, by the way. Check out Project Veritas. So he's the father of the secret ballot, right? So our system of voting, it really has a lot to do with Henry George and his ideas of theoretical collectivism, or this land tax became a kind of a social model for a lot of other countries moving forward. And I'm not saying I agree with it or disagree with it, but it's very different than what Mugabe had in store for the Rhodesians. That they actually saw, Nkomo saw a way to have people stay on the land, because what Nkomo didn't want to do is he didn't want the farmers to leave Rhodesia. He knew this, right? He knew that it was dependent. Rhodesia's success moving forward was dependent upon their ability to transition. Mugabe knew this too, but he couldn't help himself. He just couldn't help himself. He was unhinged. So the Mugabe model was the extreme status model, took everything, right? And that's where Rhodesia goes to hell in a handbasket, which is by design, by the way. And then they begin to move into South Africa. Then we had Nelson Mandela, and now we have the Mandela effect. And now we have this model, and it's really moved into the United States. It's the same playbook. It is the exact same playbook. And it is connected to the same social forces that were guiding and directing the insurgency inside of Rhodesia, which, by the way, did have to do with the so-called East and, the communist bloc, but also the West. And the West was enabling them by doing nothing at all. So it was okay for the United States to fight a war against the communists in Vietnam, but it wasn't okay for the United States to fight a war against the communists in Rhodesia. It's this kind of crazy thinking, right, that leads people just to kind of, lose their minds in some ways. And because it was not politically, theoretically correct, and no president really wanted that on their record. And really, all this begins in 1965, and Johnson is the president in 65. And there's no way Johnson is going to enter into another international conflict. And not only that, but Johnson was a socialist. And he was not going to help the Rhodesians at all. If anything, by not helping them, he would be enabling the Russians and the Chinese and the North Koreans to essentially do his own bidding. He was terrible. And then we get into this phase with Nixon. What's really interesting about Nixon? I was watching this interview last night with William F. Buckley and this Italian journalist named Luigi Barzini. And Barzini had written a book about sort of the future of Europe and talking about, where Europe is headed with the European Union. This is in 1983, very prescient book. And he talked about the difference between American diplomacy and European diplomacy. And there are three planks of European diplomacy. And one of the planks is called raison d'etre, right? Raison d'etre. And he talked about this specifically with Nixon. And it was very interesting. And he said, if Nixon had been a European, what happened to Nixon would never have happened in a European country. Like, they would have looked the other way, because it would have been more important for the country, right, to sort of maintain order and stability, that they would have seen that as, like, what's the bigger picture here, right? What is the bigger picture? What is the reason for being? And he commented on that. He said that would never have happened in Europe. They would have looked at Nixon and said, okay, we would move on. But, they needed to kill the father, right? That was their generational mandate. Removing Nixon was killing the father. And, of course, Nixon, being a Capricorn, falls into that Saturnian, pattern of being the father. And it's exactly, it was really the murder of a father ritual. That's what it was. That's exactly what it was. So, but he said that, right? He said that the Europeans, and he was like, this, why? You put your company, your country at risk and jeopardy by doing that. And it's happening now. I mean, everything that we're seeing now is really degrading. And look, the whole Hunter Biden stuff, which I'm going to get into, is obviously helping Trump. I mean, obviously, there's no way that this is not helping Trump, and completely, it's like a worm that's gotten into the Democratic Party, and it's destroying them now. If so, in a real kind of regulated world, there's no way Trump loses this election. No way, none at all. But we know that we're not living in that world. That we're living in a world where truth is lies, lies are truth, everything's inverted. A win could be a loss could be a win. So we're in upside down land. We're in bizarro world. And so in a perfect world, it's easy, slam dunk, no problem, right? But the Democrats have real issues. I mean, big issues. And the Biden stuff, even though it may not be picked up on, I want to talk about Tony Bobulinski. I'm going to transition into that. And even though the Biden stuff may not be picked up on by CNN or MSNBC or CBS or ABC or whomever, the journalists who are inside of those organizations and groups, some of whom I believe have a shred or a scintilla of conscience, and I'll give you one example. I actually think Jake Tapper has some level of conscience. I've seen it. I've watched it. I've observed Jake Tapper. Not that I watch Jake Tapper a lot. I don't. But when I do see him, I can see this look of contempt and disgust on his face. Okay. So if any of these journalists have a slight scintilla of conscience, the Biden affair is like battery acid, and it's corrosive, and it will eat away at them because they know that there's a there there, and that their role as a journalist is to transmit the news, that they are really kind of the fifth branch of the government, theoretically. The press is the unofficial, fifth branch. And people like Jake Tapper and maybe Wolf Blitzer, some of these older school commentators will not be able to deal with this. Like it will eat away at them. And the metaphor I came up with last night is that think of the Biden affair as the alien face sucker, right? From the movie. Remember that where it pops out and just jumps right onto, John Hurt's helmet, bores right in, and they take him back, and it's like living on his face. I mean, so, confession. Here's my confession. I saw Alien, and I had a few of those magical mushrooms. I had no idea what I was getting into. No idea. So I go into the theater with my girlfriend, and it's like, oh, it's an outer space adventure movie. It could be interesting. Well, it might be a little shocking. And I'm starting, go into another dimension, and all of a sudden the face sucker scene happens, and oh my God, I don't think I've ever recovered from that thing. Anyway, so they go in and they decide, they're going to try to use that little blade, little laser, cut it off, and then the acid spurts out. And then it starts to burn through the floors of, the name of their ship was the Nostromo, right? So it starts to burn through all the floors. So this is a metaphor for the press. And that acid that comes out of the face sucker, that's the Biden affair. And so the first floor that it hits are going to be people like the Jake Tappers of the world, because they're kind of still slightly human, and they have families and they have kids. They have to reconcile their morality and their character. And then it goes down through each, like, successive floor. And they're like freaking out. Like, if it gets to the bottom of the floor of the Nostromo and burns through the bottom, it opens right up to space and they're fucked, right? So they're like frantic. They're running around. They're chasing the acid dripping from floor to floor. But finally, in the last floor, it kind of congeals and stops. Like, doesn't really come through. So that's where Anderson Cooper and Don Lemon live. They're down there, right? So the corrosive nature will seep through. The corrosive nature of the Biden scandal will seep through all the various floors of the fifth column or the fifth branch of the government, right? All the way through until it gets to that bottom layer. And they're already degraded. They're already degraded. So the corrosive nature of the event will not affect them whatsoever. But somebody like Jake Tapper cannot afford to kind of live. And Chris Cuomo is somewhere around floor number 3 or 4. It will eventually get to him. I guarantee you. It will get to him. It will get to him because he won't be able to stop. These people have to go to sleep at night. Okay. And I know a lot of them will pop Xanax or they'll pop a Soma or whatever in order to Ambien, whatever, to just get to sleep and deal with their conscience. But some of them won't be able to. And this is what's happened now. So the Biden affair has become viral in the minds and in the hearts of people who are supposed to report the news. It's going to happen. It'll affect their personal lives. And it really could affect their professional lives as well, up to a point. Like I said, Jake Tapper is on the first floor, Don Lemon, Anderson Cooper, Shepard Smith, they're way down there at the bottom. Joy Reid, they're at the bottom because they're degraded. Nothing really affects them whatsoever. Nothing. Somewhere around floor before, you've got Chris Cuomo's and whoever, right? Whoever's at that level. But it will affect that. And that will be the net effect of what happens. Ultimately, let me talk a little bit about Tony Bobulinski. So last night, if you are a Tucker watcher, which I am, I love to watch Tucker Carlson. We were having this conversation last night. It's like, you're over 50 when you look forward to Tucker Carlson at night. But Tucker's, he's so square, he's cool. And he's one of the few people in the media, and he doesn't go all the way. There's inconsistencies with Tucker Carlson. For instance, I'll give you one. I have to be fair. So, it's hard now to keep up with these characters that just spin in and out of our consciousness very quickly. Jacob Blake, the guy who supposedly, got shot in Kenosha. I don't even know if he shot. I don't even know where he is. Supposed to be in a hospital. Has he been arraigned? Who knows? I don't know. What about the guy down at the Wendy's in Atlanta? Whatever happened to that guy in his trial? Piff, gone. What about the guys in Minneapolis? Oh, have you been following that? Yeah, they're probably gonna scoot on out the back door. Well, why is this? What happened to the guys in Nashville? That was the national. No, Louisville. I'm sorry, Louisville. Breonna Taylor. Nothing. Why? Because my feeling is that these events are staged. They're totally staged. Anyway, Jacob Blake, his father comes out, and his father starts capping on the Jews. He starts capping on the Jews, and he's like, and he's getting into the whole Jewish media money conspiracy thing, right? That's what his father does. And then, Tucker plays this, and then he has a Democratic, I think, congressman from New York comment on this and how terrible it is and how anti-Semitic it is, right? And it's like, look, if you vote for Joe Biden, this is who you're voting for. But on the other hand, Trump is working with Ice Cube with this platinum program. And Ice Cube came out and basically said, yeah, the Jews run the record business, the Jews control the money. And Ice Cube took a lot of heat for that, but he never apologized. He never apologized. Not once. Not once. Oh, he's hateful. He's anti-Semitic, et cetera, et cetera. And now he's running. He's going to be, basically running this, $500 zillion platinum program, whatever it is, right? And now Tucker is extolling. Tucker had Ice Cube's manager on his show probably about 2 months ago, and I thought to myself, what the hell is Ice Cube's manager doing on Tucker Carlson? Why is he there? Well, it's clear now that they were setting all this up in advance, that Ice Cube would ultimately be the recipient of this money that would come from the Trump administration and go through him and his manager. So essentially they could run social programs. And while it's not reparations, it's kind of Trump's answer to the call for reparations. But not a and Tucker extolled the virtues of this and how Ice Cube and I guess 50 Cent sort of flipped, whatever. He hasn't been relevant in years, but he did not bring up the fact that Ice Cube railed against the Jews. He did not bring that up at all. That was conveniently kind of left out. So I love Tucker, don't get me wrong, but Tucker can be very selective. If he was a real journalist, he'd say, well, there was this little problem a few months ago with Ice Cube and the Jewish community. No mention about that. However, Jacob Blake's father starts to talk about it, and all of a sudden, we got a big anti-Semitic problem here, and you better not vote for Joe Biden because this is what you get. I love Tucker. I get it. But just a little selective. I had to bring that in. All right, let's talk about Tony Bobulinski. So if you watch last night's show, Bobulinski has email after email after email detailing everything in terms of his relationship with Jim Biden. Jim Biden is really kind of Jim and Hunter Biden are the centerpiece, although Joe Biden is part of the meetings. He's part of the meetings. And the idea is to begin to make connections and business deals with Tony Bobulinski, his company, what they're doing in China, and the Biden's connections with China. And they all want in. They're going to make the introductions for Bobulinski, and there are cuts. And he talks about this. Hunter's going to get X amount. Jim's going to get X amount. This other guy's going to get X amount. I forget his name. It'll come to me. And then so what's interesting is that there's no talk of the percentage that Joe Biden gets. However, the percentage that Jim Biden gets changes. So the implication is that Jim Biden's share, part of it will go to Joe. And he talks about, if Biden runs for president, now I think this is post-Obama. If Biden runs for president, is this not going to affect him? And Joe Biden says plausible deniability. These are the words. And you could hear that coming out of his mouth. So I think Bobulinski is real. I think that he had real business interests. He had a real business model. The Bidens are predatory, and they sought him out, right? They sought him out because he says he was approached by them. He did not reach out to them. And he has emails that corroborate that. Now, here's where I think it gets interesting, okay? If you look into the background of Tony Bobulinski, he is naval intelligence. Think about that for a second. He is naval intelligence. He's not your ordinary, and this is what Tucker Carlson was trying to illustrate last night in the show. He's not your ordinary whistleblower. This guy has a history and background. His father was in the military. His grandfather was in the military. Biden even, talked to him and thanked him for his service, right? He's naval intelligence. Well, do you know who else is naval intelligence? Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is naval intelligence. So when I was watching Tony Bobulinski, I'm thinking the Bidens were set up. They were totally set up. Now, I have absolutely zero proof of this, okay? I'm just making the connections in my head. So if Tony Bobulinski is naval intelligence and Steve Bannon's naval intelligence, don't you think that maybe Tony Bobulinski had a conversation with Steve Bannon. It's like, hey, look, the Bidens have reached out to me. That's a fraternity, okay? The Bidens have reached out to me, and they want to do business with me. And Steve Bannon's like, great, let's do this, and let's put it together and amass as much evidence as we possibly can. I believe this is 2017. This is when Bannon is rerouted and taken out of the White House. And some people think that was very strategic so he could do things like what we're watching right now. I also think that's true, but I also think there was a significant conflict between him and Jared Kushner, which I don't want to get into. So Bannon leaves. And I think that while Tony Bobulinski was not set up as a honey trap, he became one. And that during this period of time when he was involved in the negotiation process with the Bidens, he was working hand in glove with Steve Bannon. This has Steve Bannon all over it, okay? Totally. Steve Bannon is also connected to Hunter Biden through Miles Guo and the Chinese apparatus that has been releasing the salacious, Hunter Biden videos. So what we're witnessing now, both with the Chinese side of this thing and with the supposed hard drives that they got, which I do believe they have. Tony Bobulinski, that's Steve Bannon all the way. Rudy Giuliani is the Ukrainian piece. So they've been working in tandem to amass as much information on Biden as possible. And I think pretty early on, they had a sense that Biden was going to be the guy that was going to run for president. So you can go back and look at the fact that Trump began to get into Ukraine and talk about Ukraine and Biden's connections with Ukraine. And immediately what happens? The Democrats go on the offensive and they say it's Trump. Trump is doing it. Trump is bullying Poroshenko or whoever the guy is and using his influence to get him to give up information on Joe Biden. And of course, it's the Ukrainian piece that becomes the linchpin for the impeachment hearings. And really what the Democrats are doing is they're doing everything in their power to deflect what Joe Biden was doing in Ukraine and really use the same thing with Trump. They were just, this is the model. They're guilty of this. They'll take it and they'll throw it at Trump. Everything that they theoretically have done with Trump, they have been involved with. Their fingerprints are all over it, okay? So he had to go through that, he had to go through impeachment shit, but they knew that he had been working on Biden. He'd been working on the relationship with the Democratic Party and the CCP and this kind of clandestine relationship with Ukraine and, Ukraine being very vulnerable and, needing money and all that stuff, right? This is, so they knew that, and they have been on the offensive against Trump this entire time because they have been amassing evidence. Now, again, what they're able to do with that evidence and how that evidence is actually parsed out, especially at this, late in the game, is going to be interesting. But it's not going to go away. It is not going to go away. Even if Joe Biden somehow is elected, like there will be repercussions. And now you have Amy Coney Barrett, who is in, and I guarantee you right now, if anything comes down to a Supreme Court vote around the ballots, right? Who do you think is going to win? It's going to be Trump. Unless Amy Coney Barrett does this, massive switch flip, and she does have her Saturn on his midheaven, which is kind of interesting. But I don't think she would. I think she would be a person that would weigh in and punch the final ticket, and like that's it. Just like in 2000 when we got into the whole, voting chat experience. It was the Supreme Court who decided who was to become president of the United States, not the people, which was, I think, a travesty. And I believe that George Bush lost that election. Now, would Al Gore been a better president? I doubt it. But I don't think Al Gore would have run 9/11. I don't think he would have run 9/11. We may have had the climate scam. We may have had a wholly different type of government, but I don't think 9/11 would have happened on Al Gore's watch. Anyway, if it comes down to the Supreme Court, Amy Coney Barrett's in there right now, and it would be quite easy for Trump to, if it gets to a Supreme Court level, it's a done deal, right? That said, if Biden is elected, somehow this thing is not going to go away. It is not going to go away. And if Biden is not elected, it's not going to go away, because this is like a version of the Stuxnet virus, and it has gotten into the mainstream media, and it has also got into the relationship with China. And this is where we're on very precarious ground, because China, if they are cornered, if they feel like their status as a global trade power is threatened, they will do things that will basically throw a spanner, as they say in England, into that experience. So we're very, very interesting territory, very interesting. And the thing that I'm actually very curious about and interested in watching unfold is that if Trump is reelected, and again, under normal circumstances, I think it's a slam dunk. If Trump is reelected, what happens to the Democratic Party after this election? What happens if the House is flipped and it's Republican? What happens if they maintain a majority in the Senate? What happens now that they have essentially, theoretically, although I have my doubts about Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, but what happens if now they have a majority on the Supreme Court? It is curtains for the Democratic Party. It's curtains. They won't really have a say. And not only that, but they have been engaged in 4 years of bullying. 4 years of bullying Trump, and more than that, the American people. And this is where they're on very dangerous ground. Because if this continues to unfold, and it will be quite easy to see the roots and the connections that all lead out from Hunter Biden and Joe Biden through the Democratic Party. Apparently, they've got pictures of Paul Pelosi in dresses. I mean, they've got a ton of shit. I mean, it could, you know, this could be curtains. You could see people like Dianne Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer. They could all be out. I mean, all these people who you just get sick of fucking seeing, right? And I'm not fond of, you know, I'm not here to bang the Republican drum. Like, you know, I can't stand Lindsey Graham. And Mitch McConnell, I can barely stomach. Rand Paul, you know, I guess, whatever. You know, I'm not a big fan of the Republican Party. But it doesn't bring up the same level of disgust when I see Jerry Nadler or Adam Schiff. I can tell you that right now. And it would bring me great pleasure to see the whole thing implode on these people. Just completely implode. So that ultimately, if there is a Democratic Party moving forward, maybe it'll be a better version of the Democratic Party. Maybe they'll kind of remember, you know, their roots and, you know, what made them at one point in time kind of a viable option. But I think we have bigger issues. I don't think it's really about the Republicans versus the Democrats or conservatives versus progressives. The bigger issue was what I laid out yesterday. And what I laid out yesterday has everything to do with the World Economic Forum, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and the Great Reset. That is the battleground. That is the battleground. And unfortunately, it's been reduced to something very different. Like the theater of conflict has been reduced to the internecine battles between these two parties. That's really just kabuki theater. The bigger battle is taking place at a much higher level. It's taking place at a global level. And that's where ultimately, if Trump does win, that's where the focus needs to shift to, right? It's got to, in order for us to retain and maintain our humanity, to not be subjected to just insane COVID-19 restrictions for, what is really kind of a modified version, a gain of function controlled virus that is based on the common fucking cold. And, it can do some damage, but if you take care of yourself, you'll be okay. You'll be okay. Vitamin D, vitamin K, vitamin C, right? You'll be okay. You'll be fine. The flu, by the way, the flu count is really down now, isn't it? Interesting. But this is where this is where the next battle is really going to be, because they're using COVID-19 as a complete broad spectrum attack and control system. It's exactly what's happening. I want to show you some weird stuff too that's in relation to the COVID-19, and especially with Europe. I'm going to play you some very interesting video, and video that I think is troubling and disturbing as it relates to this. Okay, but that's where it's at, right? So, it's we've been fighting this battle against this sort of socialist and communist insurgency, and we're not done with it yet, because it is global. And communism and socialism is only a mechanism to essentially create a world order. That's all it is. And capitalism was used for a while until, they said, well, we really don't want the middle class to kind of rise up and make a lot of money and get institutional and generational wealth. No, we got to stop the capitalism thing. It worked for us for a while. We use them as workers, we incentivize them and everything, but that's over now. Right? That whole game is over. So they want to do something very, very new. We talked about it yesterday. And the idea, and I had a reading with a woman yesterday, wonderful person, and really kind of switched on, and really wants to have a life outside the United States. And her chart kind of suggests that. If you can do that, great, thumbs up. And her idea is to move somewhere in Europe. And I'm saying, well, you have to understand, right, that the EU has a very different idea of the future than what we have. And in the World Economic Forum and the world moving forward, nobody owns anything. Nobody owns anything. It's a collectivist and statist idea. It's not even like Georgism. It's beyond that. It's beyond Georgism. Because then if they don't want you on that land, they'll kick you off the fucking land. At least with the Georgism stuff, if you have a lease to the land, you're good. They just tax the land. You can't make any profit off. You can't sell it, right? You can't sell it. They'll let you improve it. Why not? It's in their best interest for you to improve that land, but you don't profit from the improvement. Some people say, oh, that's un-American. I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it is un-American. But as a remedy for the state having complete control and ownership of the land, it's a different sort of flavor. But that's what the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab are bringing to the table. And the idea of the reset is that you will own nothing. You'll have no debt. There'll be no debt. All your debt will be wiped out, whether it's a mortgage or whether it's a student loan or whatever it is. It'll all be gone. And they'll make a deal and say, we're going to wipe out your debt, and we're going to give you an annual universal basic income salary every month. But in order to do that, in order to pay for it, we need to own everything. So you're going to have to give us your property, your car, everything you own. You will have, this will become the collateral for the reset and the new economy. So here's the deal. Here's the deal. You will be debt-free forever. You will never have or incur another debt in your life. Okay? Boom, done. You'll get money every month. You won't have to worry about an income. Now, if you want to get more income, that's another story. But you won't own anything. We're going to use everything to pay for that. That's where it's all going. This is their idea. This is their plan. This is their model. You will own nothing and you will be happier than you've ever been before. That is what they're selling. Okay. That's what they're selling. Now, I still I still need Trump to prove himself in this arena, to prove that he is, if he's going to be a globalist, then it's got to be under his terms, right? His terms. And whatever his terms are, that the United States is running the globalist program, which it kind of in some ways has been in some ways. Like I could see Trump jumping on globalism in that regard. As long as he's running the program, I don't think he has a problem with it. You know, he likes to boast that, you know, that he was able to renegotiate NAFTA and all that stuff. And really what he did is he kind of renegotiated NAFTA, rolled in TTP, and, you know, did that USMCA deal, which nobody really has looked at. But it's like, you know, he's boasting that it's a much better deal. I don't know. I haven't gotten into the fine details around it. Maybe one of these days when I've got an extra 20 hours in my day, I'll do that. But, you know, I'm going to see where he is on the global game, because that's really where this is at now. And I kind of called out the EU yesterday. And when I watched that show last night, well, The Firing Line, which I highly recommend, and I'll put a link into it. It's on YouTube. It's William F. Buckley's interview with Luigi Barzini, an Italian journalist. And he talks about the European tradition versus the American tradition. And he talks about where Europe is headed. And he is forecasting the European Union. Now, if I was Trump, what I would do is I would do a EU tariff tax, meaning any product that comes from the EU, I would tax heavily. I would tariff it heavily. And I would also move right out of NATO, and I would move all the troops out of the European theater. I would do it in a heartbeat. Because now all of a sudden you're putting the pressure on the actual countries inside of the European Union. So if I was Trump, what I would do is I would create regime change in Europe, because you have to disassemble the EU. The EU is the apparatus of the UN, and it is sort of the nest, right? It is the nest of the global mind and the connection between the East and the West. China. And yesterday I talked about Israel and how Klaus Schwab is connected to both of them, right? Look at all of his degrees, his honorary degrees, his doctorates, deeply embedded in both of those countries, in both of those governments, in both of those systems, okay? So you have to disassemble the EU, because they're the bridge between the East and the West. So you make it very, very difficult. You put a huge tariff on I'm sorry, Europe, I love you, but really I have to be difficult. I have to be a hard father. I have to show you tough love, because what you need to do is you need to undo your deal with the fucking European Union and come up with something better, come up with something different, come up with something that is both national and regional and sort of connected in a different sort of way. Because if that doesn't happen, then we're marching forward towards Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, and the partnership really is between the EU and China, right? And even to a large extent, Israel. You look at Belt and Road, man, and it goes right through those countries, goes through Russia, goes through Israel. You know, China's running the port of Haifa right now, and it goes right into Europe, right? So you just got to follow the tracks. You got to follow the train tracks with Belt and Road to know what's up. So in order to undo this global dominance, the global dominator, I believe the EU is the key. And I know I sound radical, and I don't want to, a lot of people, you know, watch this show from England. I love you. And a lot of people from other parts of Europe watch this show. We got them in the chat. I love you. I just wish you weren't part of the EU, and that you could retain your national identity again. And at the same time, have better and stronger relations with one another outside of the European Union. because I think it's dangerous, very, very dangerous. And this is really what we're up against, in my estimation. Everybody's looking at China. Oh, China is the big threat. China is the big threat. Russia, Russian collusion, and and there are people say, oh, well, Israel, Israel's really got their hooks in. We got dual citizens in there. I think it's the EU. I think the EU is the beast system, and that needs to be disassembled. So that, and I don't care. I don't want the United States to run the world. I really don't. I'm kind of tired of that game. I think the world needs to kind of run itself in sort of equal partnership, but not in the way that Klaus Schwab and the post-20th century industrialists envision with their transhumanist wet dream. So this is what I would do if I was Trump. You got to put the brakes on it. You got to pump the brakes on it. Look what's happening in Australia. Look what's happening in New Zealand. What's going to happen in Canada? I mean, these are countries that have been absolutely targeted, and they're being basically put under the crushing thumb of oppression due to COVID-19. It's got to change. It has got to change. So we're in revelatory times, absolutely revelatory times. And I know I'm talking about political ideas and political solutions. And, to me, on a kind of a global chessboard, that's how I would work it. But the real, testing ground for each and every one of us is how we live our lives, and how we take care of ourselves, and how we nurture ourselves and how we nurture others in our immediate environment, immediate sphere. And one of the things that I've been dealing with is I've been dealing with some real back issues, and this one kind of symptom that I've been really struggling with, very painful and affecting me in my chest and back area. I had a feeling that it wasn't really structural, that it was something else, that it might be due to some form of inflammation. So I looked around and I found this thing called costochondritis. I'm like, wow, that sounds a lot like what I have. That's maybe my thing, because it feels like I have a broken rib. So one of the things that I decided to do was up my intake of vitamin D and vitamin K. And guess what? This back thing that's been plaguing me for literally months now has been dissipating. I'm like, oh, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? I changed the mechanism of the inflammation, and now this is changing, right? So we're ground zero. Each and every one of us is ground zero. And I got to tell you a really inspiring story, very inspiring story. And then I'm going to get on some other stuff, get on Hunter Biden and a few other things. I had a client yesterday, very interesting person, and somebody who came to me through just the YouTube channel, YouTube feed. See, this is kind of why YouTube's important in some ways. And she was watching another astrologer, and so my astrology show came up in her feed. So she started watching my show. She had no connection with Regina or anybody like that. And I did this reading for this woman, and she really blew me away. Just totally blew my mind. Born in Mexico City, lives in California now, and very interesting chart in a lot of ways. So, we're getting into, I'm trying to, untangle her chart, and I could see where she had great willpower. She had Mercury in Aries, Saturn in Leo, and a very nice trine between the two. I'm like, wow, this woman's got some willpower. So she tells me the story that she went to the doctors, and the doctor said there's about a 3% chance you could become pregnant. And she really wanted to have a child. It was a big deal for her. She really wanted to have a child. So she did not just kind of lay down and go, oh, well, guess it's not happening. I guess I better look into adoption. Nothing wrong with adopting a child, by the way. And what she did is she began to research, and she began to look at perhaps what might be the causes of her supposed infertility. So what she did is she radically changed her diet. She went into a very kind of regulated, but very clear program of detoxifying her body. And as she did this, as she cleansed her body and reclaimed her body, she wound up, meeting a man. And that man became the father of her child. And so she went back to the doctor and basically told the doctor that not only had she become pregnant, but she had a child. And the doctor was shocked. And he couldn't believe it because based on all her markers and everything that he had seen, that this should not be happening. But she proved him wrong. She proved him wrong. And the reason I'm sharing this story with you is, number one, it's inspiring. It's a very inspiring story because this is a woman of really humble means in a lot of ways, very humble means. But she was so guided and directed and so clear about what her goal was that she was able to commit herself to that path and find a way through. And she manifested what she really wanted in life, was to have a child and to love a child and to become a mother. So I just want to share that with you because that's where it all starts. You're at ground zero. You are the crucible of transformation and change in your own life. Okay. And don't ever forget the amount of power that you have every single day. You have more power than you understand or know, even more than I know. Right. And I try to tap into this as much as I can. And the challenge with everything being politicized is it takes us out of it. It takes us out of the potential of who we are. We have to understand it. We have to understand the global game in some ways because we don't want to necessarily, have our head in the sand and, go buy a property because the game is changing so quickly. I told the story about a friend here in town whose son went to Poland to go study fashion. He got a scholarship, local scholarship, University in Poland accepted him. He goes there. It's great. They're meeting in classrooms. He brings a skateboard. He's the American kid. He's a good skater, skating at, the parks in Poland. He's a good looking kid. And now he's got all these European women who are, like, ooh, you're something. He's tall, he's a Libra. I mean, do the math on this kid. And then they shut it down. They just shut everything down. So the world we're living in is really changing very, very rapidly. Right? So we have to be aware. And even when we are aware, and even when it looks like Poland is theoretically a good choice because of how they've, really pushed back from this idea of these, communist ideologies and have decided that they want to embrace, kind of these more conservative Catholic values like the right to life and anti-abortion and things like that. They're still under the umbrella of the EU, and they're going to do what the EU tells them to do. So we have to understand on some level what's happening politically, but that should never really ultimately determine our interface with reality. All right, what's going on with you guys out there? Let's see. Airbnb has put a restriction on us, making it impossible for us to continue starting November 20th. We are reimagining ways of income, turning into a vehicle for creativity. They're all in on it, man. They're all in on it. They're all in on it. Poland is never it's never a good choice. It's always going to be a geopolitical melt zone. See, you're right. I mean, it's always been sort of how shall we say? What's the word I'm looking for? Molten, which is what you're referring to. But you would think that at some point, they would have woken up and understood the kind of the lessons and the hardships of the hardcore Stalinist communist program. But what was interesting about Poland? A lot of people don't talk about this, but I think it was around 2010 or 2011 when all those Polish leaders died in that airplane crash. Do you remember that? You remember that? These were people that were basically ready to set up their own bank, independent of the IMF. and they were all taken out in basically one plane crash. And I bet you remember that. I'd love your take on that, Sigurd. Let's see, they're all in it. Yes, they are. Absolutely. Trapped between Germany, Sweden, Russia, Austria, and Hungary. Yeah. Let's see, what else? Can't you just straight out rent the space? Or what's up with El Paso, Texas, locking down for 2 weeks? So El Paso and Laredo are border towns. Okay, they're border towns, and they're almost like these. They're turning into like no-go zones. Laredo has been incredibly stringent and strict on the COVID side of things, like really hardcore. Like I would not even want to get anywhere near Laredo, and El Paso is kind of in the same camp, and it's troubling for a number of reasons. Number one, if you look at some of the maps that have kind of emerged, in this sort of, post-democratic, whatever version of the United States, post-Pluto return to the United States, the Southwest reverts to Mexico. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but there has been a noticeable presence of Chinese nationals inside of Mexico for a while now. And there's also been not just speculation, but people having to deal with people at the border in Tijuana that are not American, that they are indeed Chinese. So, this could be part of the Chinese influence kind of infiltrating across the border. And, again, what's happened is that because of the state of national emergency that Trump declared, the states have been literally decoupled from the we're no longer united. And even inside of a particular state, you could have a city doing one thing and a city doing another thing. And it could be absolutely maddening. So I could take you to a place like, Rockwall, which is near Dallas. And the mayor and the sheriff of Rockwall are enforcing strict no mask and no social distancing orders. And Greg Abbott is letting them do that. He's letting them do that, right? So in Rockwall, you have a very different reality than El Paso. El Paso is also on the border of New Mexico. And New Mexico is really totalitarian. Just ask Uncle Glenn. He'll break it down for you in chat. So, we're dealing with this very Gemini-like reality now, where the world is quite different than it's ever been. And there are, it's almost like, when there is a real theoretical virus, they have these hot zones, and a virus can pass through a certain area, and other people are kind of left outside of that. We're kind of in that place now. And let me show you something. I wanted to bring this article up because it really, in a lot of ways, speaks to the power of the people in a positive sense, in a very, very positive sense. Just clear this out a little bit. I was doing some late night shopping last night. Let me show you. What I got here. Hold on. All right. It's a story. Where is it? This is a whole other thing. God damn. All right. All right. Here's what I wanted to show you. This is the story of the power of the people. Okay. Now, I had a phone call with somebody from the Philadelphia area last week, and they were complaining about what's going on. And well, we're not really complaining, but they were talking about how difficult it is to go out in public and eat, and the ritual. So here's this story of this guy, right, who has an Italian restaurant, and he said, "We ain't paying crap after 10,000 in COVID-19 fines." And he just beat the left-wing Pennsylvania governor in court. So over the summer, the co-owner of Taste of Sicily, an Italian restaurant in Palmyra, Pennsylvania, made headlines when he defied left-wing Governor Tom Wolf's COVID-19 shutdown mandates and scoffed at the $10,000 in fines that came along with them. Some rob you with a gun, while others rob you with a pen. Co-owner Mike Mangiano declared to Penn Live at the time, referred to Wolf, "We ain't paying crap." The restaurant opened at full capacity in May, a violation of Wolf's shutdown orders, and the eatery didn't require masks or social distancing, and plexiglass barriers weren't up, the station said. Mangano, I'd like to talk to this guy, cited financial struggles for the decision to reopen. WHP-TV reported the restaurant's attorney, Eric Winter, said as much, telling, by the way, if you're a restaurant owner in Pennsylvania, you got to hire that cat right there. Eric Winter is your man. Said as much, telling the station the business needed it, the family needed it, and they needed it to do things to survive. They went ahead and reopened. And at that point, they had great support from the local level elected officials. Important. But not from the state government. The Department of Agriculture delivered citations to the Taste of Sicily with fines amounting to $10,000. Mangiano, however, told Penn Live the restaurant wouldn't shut down its dining room or even pay the fines. There's absolutely no fear here. We're going to continue to come to work, and the governor ain't going to do anything about it. We don't care what the repercussions may be. We want the world to see how ridiculous it is for being penalized to go to work, he said in a June press conference. Nobody's asking business owners to take up arms or go to war. Open your doors already. So there you go. You see, it can be done. It can be done. This guy fought the law, and the law didn't win. He won. He was able to get a judgment in his favor, okay? And guess what? He's got a restaurant that's open. He's got people that support him locally. You see, that's the key. You're going to have local support. El Paso has been a big Democratic town for a very long time. That's Beto or work country. So just do the math on that. And this is all. We can do this, right? They did it in Michigan. They took on Whitmer, Michigan. They took her on. And guess what? They won. The House, the state legislature said, you can't do this. You can't enforce this lockdown. The Attorney General of Michigan supported the state legislator and ruled against the governor. And of course, she's going to try to do everything in her power to hold on to her power and do what her, little puppet masters tell her to do. So what happens? Well, they cook up this cockamamie scheme of some guys going to kidnap her. This right-wing terror group. That's their answer to when people stand up to their tyranny. They come up with this entrapment scheme. And that's what happened, right? Oh, look what's happening. Anyway, I'm just telling you, we're not powerless in these situations, but you have to have support. You have to have the local people behind you. Because if the constabulary, the people in your area are not going to find you, or they're not going to go there and arrest you, well, guess what? In many ways, the state is powerless. Now, the state could stand in the National Guard, the state police, or whatever, and now you'd have a showdown. Now you'd have a showdown with them, and you'd have a showdown with, the fans of A Taste of Sicily, the sheriff. And if I'm not mistaken, that part of Pennsylvania are big gun owners. And they don't want to do that. In fact, Western Pennsylvania basically went like this to Governor Wolf. He said, fuck you. we're opening back up. And they really haven't done anything. They don't want a confrontation there. They'll allow confrontation to take place in Philadelphia, but not in Western Pennsylvania, because they know they'll lose there. They will lose on many levels. So, everything is boiled down to this very Gemini-like reality, Gemini being the third house and the world around you, right? You need to have local support. If you're in an area where you are not supported locally, you better rethink where you're living. And even here in Texas, it varies from place to place. Like I could go down the road to Johnson City and man, the mask Nazis are just out in force. And you have to be very, kind of, how do I say this, clever about how you approach certain situations. Here in this town, I've been mask free from day one. And nobody's given me any hassles at all. Last night I went to had to go to Walmart because the Ace Hardware was closed. So I went to Walmart to get a couple of tarps for a few of the plants that we have in the backyard because it was going to freeze last night. They got the security guard at the front door. He doesn't do shit, right? He doesn't do shit. There's no excuse me, you'll need a mask. You need a mask now. No, they don't do shit. You know why? Because Walmart knows that they're in trouble. If they decline you service and you have an underlying condition, you got an issue. Although I will say, Greg Abbott has recently made a ruling that is disturbing. And basically, the ruling that he made is that social workers do not have to work with people who are LGBTQ and or disabled. This is a fact, okay? Now, it is pure discrimination at that point. But Abbott is doing it for a reason, because what he wants to do is he wants to set a precedent that government workers don't have to follow the same rules as the private sector. So if a government worker declines to work with somebody who has a disability, then if you're somebody in the private sector, you're going, well, hey, maybe I don't have to work with somebody that's disabled. Maybe I don't have to let this person in my store if they're wearing a mask and have an underlying condition. So it's a strange precedent that I think Abbott is setting. Abbott's weird, man. Don't even get me started on that guy. Anyway, the local area is really important. It's very important. You need to know that, right? Stephen Chris, my heart goes out to you. I think you're going to have to reinvent what you do. And you have become an oasis for people in a lot of ways. And they know that you're there, and you're kind of an interesting and very important node in this invisible network that we have somehow sort of kind of manifested. So I really hope that you do find a workaround and that you can continue to do what you do and be supported outside of that network. So I heartily encourage you to look at the options because you're good at it. And not only does it provide you with some nice income, but it also provides people a place and a space to hang out and experience this wonderful world that you and Chris have created together. So, I know we're all pulling for you. And I've given you some suggestions. Tomorrow we'll have Russell J. Gould on. We'll see what he has to say about all this and get some of his insights, takes, et cetera, et cetera. So, oh, by the way, our friend Glenn Streeter was on Jeffrey Doherty's show a couple days ago. So if you are a fan of Jeffrey Doherty, who has apparently a very popular YouTube channel, you could go check out Glenn and his partner in his business. And they're talking about a lot of the things that Glenn talked about a week ago, but also what's happening on the ground in Colorado with the fires. So you may want to check that podcast out. So there are a few other things I wanted to bring up today. God, I have so much to share and really just not enough time. I ran across this yesterday, and this is the Hunter Biden piece that really, to me, is in a lot of ways the big smoking gun. Yeah. If you haven't seen Tony Bobulinski, let me show you a picture of him really quickly. This is him right here. This is the guy, and he's got it. He's got all the emails. All the emails. Boom. Right there. And, will it make a difference in terms of the election results? A lot of people voted. A lot of people are just so anti-Trump. They don't really care. They just don't care. But it will make a difference in the hearts and minds of people reporting the story, because it is corrosive, highly, highly corrosive. I'm just trying to circle back to, oh God, I got so much I wanted to cover here. I don't want to cover that. Let's see. Is this Venmo? I can't stand Venmo. People always ask me, I do have Venmo, by the way. But you know what Venmo's like? Venmo's like PayPal for people. Venmo's like PayPal for young people who like emojis and shit. And, oh, look what I bought. Look what I just bought. Because you can share your purchases with the community. Like, why anybody want to do that is beyond me. I'm sorry. I want people to know what I buy. It's like Venmo's weird to me that way. I'm not a huge fan. Anyway, somebody went on to Venmo, and all the Bidens have Venmo accounts. Most of them were public up until yesterday. Anyway, so I do want to play this. To me, this is really the smoking gun. And this is Hunter Biden, and he's basically spilling the beans. If you haven't heard this, get ready. It's all here. And I'm surprised. I hope Tucker Carlson plays this tonight. Here we go.
I get calls from my father to tell me that the New York Times is calling, but my old partner, Eric, who literally has done me harm for I don't know how long, is the one taking the calls because my father will not stop sending the calls to Eric. I have another New York Times reporter calling about my representation of literally, Dr. Patrick Ho, the fucking spy chief of China, who started the company that my partner, who was worth $323 billion, founded, and is now missing. The richest man in the world is missing, who was my partner. He was missing since I last saw him in his $58 million apartment and signed a $4 billion deal to build the fucking largest fucking LNG port in the world. And I am receiving calls from the Southern District of New York, from the U.S. Attorney himself. My best friend in business, Devin, has named me as a witness without telling me in a criminal case, and my father without telling me.
There you go. That's all you need to hear. This is. Listen to this again. The two most important parts of this audio are the one where he talks about his business partner who did a deal with the top spy. He's the chief intelligence operator in China. And now he's missing. This is his partner. This is his business partner. I don't know if he's the richest man in the world. That's hyperbole. But apparently worth $387 billion or something like that. And then he talks about Devin Archer, who has turned against him. Now he's a state witness and then turned against his father. This is a big deal. This is a very big deal. Once Devin Archer turned, like this is get out the violins for the Biden family here. And then the other piece is the New York Times calling his father, and his father not taking the calls and routing them to his other business partner. Look, if you're Hunter Biden's business partner, I think you should be concerned, because one is missing, the other's in prison. So if you are this guy's business partner, you should be wearing a flak jacket and hiring 24/7 security. I'll play it again.
I get calls from my father to tell me that the New York Times is calling, but my old partner Eric, who literally has done me harm for I don't know how long, is the one taking the calls because my father will not stop sending the calls to Eric. I have another New York Times reporter calling about my representation of the, literally, Dr. Patrick Coe, the fucking spy chief of China, who started the company that my partner, who was worth $323 billion, founded, and is now missing. The richest man in the world is missing, who was my partner. He was missing since I last saw him in his $58 million apartment and signed a $4 billion deal to build the fucking largest fucking LNG port in the world. And I am receiving calls from the Southern District of New York, from the U.S. Attorney himself. My best friend in business, Devin, has named me as a witness without telling me in a criminal case, and my father without telling me.
Without telling you. Like he would really like, hey, Hunter, listen, man, I'm going to out you to the U.S. Attorney, okay? You know, it's nothing personal, bro, but, you know, I got to get out of this fucking prison. Like, do you think he's actually going to do that? Like, how long would he be alive? The Bidens would have a contract out on his ass in prison like that, right? Without telling. What you're hearing is a model of victimization, which goes hand in hand with drug abuse. So Hunter Biden's blaming everybody in the world for his problems except himself. It's the New York Times, it's the U.S. State Attorney, it's his father, it's his partner, his former partner, and then he's got a real problem on his hands when his other partner has just completely disappeared and having a very, very lucrative deal with the Chinese. That is a smoking gun tape right there. Right there. You put that together with Tony Bobulinski and the texts and the emails, and you know, this thing is really corrosive. And I haven't even got into like the hardcore. I talked about it yesterday, the hardcore porn stuff, and there are pictures now. It looks like, you know, his daughter-in-law / niece, you know, might even be pregnant. I mean, we're into really bizarre territory. It's not good for the country, though. I will say this. I mean, if it is part of, you know, getting rid of the toxic residue, you know, of corruption, if it goes down that path. And by the way, there's also all this chatter that Hunter Biden is also linked to child trafficking. Now, I don't know that specifically. It's chatter. So I tend to report on what I can see or comment on, like that video or like that audio I just played for you. But it's not good for this country. And at some point, the program really has to shift and change. You know, that the national identity or collective identity, which in a lot of ways we cannot necessarily be dependent upon. But, you know, it's like the great paradox. You're the center of the universe, but you're not, right? And we live in, or I live in this country. And I'm not really dependent upon the national identity of the country. But I don't think it's good for the country at large to be degraded like that and to be demoralized. I don't think it's good. You know, think of it as your family. Do you want that kind of scandal in your family? Do you want your family dragged through the mud every day? And I'm not even talking about the Biden family. I'm talking about the family of this country. The answer to that is no. If you care about your family, man, you circle the wagons and you make sure that you clean up your act and you protect your assets and resources. You protect the character and the nature of your family. I mean, that's the idea, right? And this is our family in a large extent, and it's a global family as well. You know, and this has, and what we're experiencing with COVID has far-reaching consequences. Masaki sent me a video of people in Nigeria rioting, like they don't have any fucking food. They're like losing their minds. losing their minds. Oh, that's really, that's really worked out well there. You know who was a really interesting character was Fela Kuti, the musician. He was a very interesting character, and he had great political awareness, and he really wanted to create a Pan-African society and a Pan-African culture. And he was run. He was run out of Nigeria. Like he did attempt. If you want to really go down a very interesting rabbit hole, read about Fela Kuti and his story and his political connections, his musical connections. Not a perfect person by any stretch, okay, but he understood what the game was. And unlike people like Frantz Fanon or Robert Mugabe or even Nelson Mandela, who had very localized interests, Fela Kuti had an idea for a Pan-African kind of experience, and he was very threatening. He had numerous attempts on his life. He was shot up a number of times. He had to leave Nigeria. I think he had to go to, Uganda, if I'm not mistaken. He had to get out. Right. So he's a very interesting character, and eventually he meets his demise. I think he winds up dying of AIDS, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, Nigeria is going through hell. There's a trickle-down effect now. Let me show you a few other things before I get out of here today, because they've been on the radar, and I have to sort of play them. I've got so much stuff, man. I have so much stuff. I just don't have the requisite amount of time to get through it all. Where are we? Oh, here's a good one. Here's a good one. Bet you won't see this one on mainstream media. Woman stabs shop worker 27 times for telling her to put on her mask. So these two are sisters. And they stabbed a security guard 27 times in Chicago. By the way, J.B. Pritzker has ordered a full lockdown in his state. Of course, his wife and kids aren't there. The two women were requested to wear masks and use hand sanitizer to help mitigate the spread of the coronavirus. They refused, began to film the security guard on a phone. When he asked them to leave, an altercation began with the guard attempting to grab the phone. Should never have done that, by the way. When he was struck by a garbage can. The two women then began to punch him. As the scuffle continued, 21-year-old Jessica Hill pulled a hidden blade, home knife, out and stabbed the man, while 18-year-old Jayla Hill allegedly held him in place. They stabbed this guy 27 fucking times. The guy's 6'5", 270, and he survived. And he held him down. They're both arrested. Well, you're not going to hear about this. I don't think MSNBC is going to report this. They're not going to report this. Now, if it was, let's say, I don't know, two Republicans, two conservative people who got into that, oh boy, you would see that and you would not hear the end of it. Right? But this is where the mask madness, they're really, really pushing the envelope here. Totally pushing the envelope. I got another one for you. And this one's going to flip your wig too. Let me get rid of Henry George. Let's see. Where is this? I guess I can get rid of the Mugabe. I think I've covered Rhodesia enough. Although I did want to get into some of the charts here. So I can get rid of some of these tabs that are open. Let's see. We got rid of that. Okay. We got that. Okay, we got that. All right. The solar eclipse. Oh, this is what I wanted to show you right here. Yeah. I think this is it. Yeah, okay. So, you got to check this out. So this is for my good friends in England. A super Karen decides she's going to perform a citizen's arrest on two Muslim women at what appears to be like a gas station mini mart. Now, by and large, the Muslim women are going to be wearing a burqa, right? So they're kind of already masked up as a society and as a religion. But apparently, for some reason, in this moment, they're not wearing the mask. And this woman and this guy take exception, and I'm going to show you what happens. Here we go.
Civil arrest?
Is it because he's not got a mask on?
So this guy here is threatening this guy because he doesn't have a mask on. Now look at the size differential here. Okay. And now we have the hardcore virtue signalers who have been literally behaviorally modified to perform this role as the attack dogs, as the bulldogs of the mask-wearing vanguard. Here we go. Now these women right here, you want them on your side. Because what are they doing? They literally right here have his back, right? They have his back. They're not going to let this guy push him around. Okay, let's keep going.
Oh, stop it. Fucking hell.
Now, what's interesting here is we have polarity, right? We have black and white. We have Western, non-Western. This is a total typical Gemini, true node in Gemini moment. All right. South node Sagittarius for religion and people from another country. Here we go. Here's your Western, tropical Placidus, mundane astrology lesson of the day.
Oh, shit. I'm going to show this to policeman. I'm actually showing.
Now, these women aren't wearing masks. It's the dude that wasn't wearing a mask. All right, let's keep going. They're trying to perform a citizen's arrest.
The police. Now there's two things going on.
All right. Now this guy is saying, fuck you. I've had enough. And he's going to take on somebody who's considerably larger than himself. Yeah, this guy's got the heart of a lion. Here we go.
Yeah, they would have locked up. Oh!
Now look at that. Now they come to his rescue. All right. I'm telling you right now, man. These are your ride and die gals right here. Like, they are not going to let this dude get the best of this guy. They're coming in. They're coming in hot. Here we go.
Shit.
Get the police here now! Get the police here!
Stand back, babe. The citizen arrested him.
Yes, they refused to wear a mask. I'm clinically vulnerable. You know what their response was? To get out of the car, the man to come in front of me and fucking hit me.
I've got it on film as well.
They're refusing to wear a mask. They cover their faces. They try to.
Refusing to wear a mask. All right, look what's happening here. Refusing to wear a mask. Oh, okay. Yeah, well,
They try to hit
looks like your mask came off.
you in the car. I slammed the car and stop it. You fucking stop it.
Is that her calling you?
Thank you.
Oh, shit. Babe.
Now the Jolly Green Giant's on the ground. Okay, so, you know, here's the lesson here. Here's the lesson here. They were trying to arrest this guy. He was trying to do a citizen's arrest on the dude for not wearing a mask, okay? And guess what? He's in the wrong. He's in the wrong. And when you're in the right, guess what? You have kind of this moral authority that moves through you. And this guy is like, what, a quarter of his size? And now this dude's on the ground. And here they come. Here's your ride or die infantry coming in.
Oi! No!
Now they're getting their kicks in.
No, don't kick him out when he's down. Oi, guys, stop now, stop. Oi, don't kick him out when he's down. Are you mad? You alright? Where's your glasses?
Now, obviously, there's some tension here. Okay? There's some tension. And I don't think it's the mask. I think it's kind of an underlying cultural tension that's getting played out. But they should have left them alone. They should have let the guy without his mask go about his business. But they couldn't do that. They had to assert their so-called authority for the greater good, probably working out some underlying cultural tension, and they were in the wrong. And guess what happened? They got their asses kicked.
Right, they bust his eye open. You don't kick a man when they're down, are you mad?
Put your fucking mask on, it's the law!
I've just got that on film. That is absolutely disgusting.
Well, you should have stayed out of their business, right? You're basically performing the role of the state at that point. And you got your ass kicked. Plain and simple. Plain and fucking simple. They do not play by the same rules. They don't play by the same rules. And they were going to sit there and have that guy, theoretically, beat on that other guy. Well, that apparently he didn't need their help, right? He didn't need their help because he got his ass kicked. And, this is what happens. So this is where they were not going to stand by and be bullied or coerced or carried out. They're like, fuck that. So they basically said, we're going all in here. And I guarantee you that dude in the red jacket, he's not going to try to play sheriff moving forward. I think his mask sheriff days are over at this point. And again, I don't like to see people fighting. I don't like to see people at each other's throats. I'd rather we all get along and respect one another. But when people try to tell you what to do and think that they're in the right or they're performing something that has kind of this moral directive or moral imperative when really they have no business dispensing it, then they get what's coming. They get what they're asking for. And in that moment, they didn't know it, but they were headed for Dave Chappelle keeping it real beatdown. And that's exactly what happened. Again, I think there's probably some underlying cultural tension, but you know what? Just let them go about their business. Just let them go about their business. That's the moral of the story right there. All right. Let's see. What else do we have here? I think these masks cuts off the oxygen to these people's brains. Absolutely. Where is the state in all this? People not getting along. The state should not regulate nor negotiate how people behave with one another. That's not the state's role. What the state has done is the state has created a state of division and conflict. That's where the state is. They want this to happen. They want it to happen. They want people at each other's throats. It's exactly what they want. It creates a lot of loosh, right? A lot of bad feeling, a lot of enmity, a lot of chaos. They can move people around. It's exactly what they want. Exactly what they want. These people should have just left them alone. Totally. The only person you control is yourself. Amazing how people forget this. This is why I just wear a face shield. Nobody says anything to me and I can still breathe. Look, if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. The face shield's probably, the least disruptive because you can still breathe. I guess if I was forced to wear something, it came down to a mask or a face shield, I'd wear a face shield too. But I think at some point the face shield will not be good enough. Let's see, what else do we have here? Are we ascended here? Only way to deal with a pack of proles is a cattle prod or a stack of Amazon vouchers. Let's see, Drew, man, you're classic. Let's see. These deeper tensions are all engineered. That's right. Tender, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Of course. Spot on, Christine. Got them enforcing the law, but there really is no law. There really is. It's a mandate, not a law, right? It's the law, exactly. The mask, also known as the chin hammock in my book. I see so many hanging under the chin. Absolutely. You know, the working classes here are an absolute furnace of various resentments. They've been fucked over, man. Europe's been fucked over. Sorry, that's my case against the EU, and that's my case against the UN. Europe's been fucked over. Now, look, there was a time, I've been looking into Enoch Powell, his Rivers of Blood speech, and ultimately Enoch Powell was right. I think in the context of the time that he was referring to, that period of migration into England actually worked out fairly well. That there was a high degree of integration. Like you get things like, the two-tone movement, the ska movement. Like there are people hanging out and getting together. We get UB40, right? So that actually worked out okay. It's the periods after that where England and the rest of Europe really gets mired in this sort of caustic crucible of migration and refugee policy, which happened so quickly and so intensely with very little assimilation. And I think that's where ultimately Enoch Powell was right. I think in his declaration of what migration looked like at the time, I actually think it worked out better in a lot of ways, because I've talked with people from England about this, and that, that they got along well, that it worked out okay, that there was a sense of being able to live with one another. And that includes people from East India as well, lots of great curry restaurants, curry shops in England. But it's the latter wave of refugee migration, which really starts to, take shape around 2011. This is where it changes the nature and the social and political complexion in Europe. And it's not necessarily the fact that they should close their borders and not allow anybody in, but it was how it was created, the mandates, the numbers, and the lack of real ideas about how to assimilate a new group of people over a period of time. It literally has overwhelmed the system, and that was the point. Okay, I'm out of here for today. Thanks for being a part of the show. I know some of the ideas and the things I talk about might be a bit controversial, but really, I do my best to think through them and be as fair and as have as much common sense and as much of as an enlightened perspective as I can. And I know you do as well. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Hit the like button, share the show. I know it's 2 hours. Most people don't want to listen to something for 2 hours. I get it. But some people do. Put it on in the background. Listen to it at night. I promise I'll put you to sleep. All right. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Thanks for being here. Tomorrow, Russell J. Gould. And I think we're gonna talk to our favorite biological dentist on Mercury retrograde about, guess what? The removal of Mercury from your fillings. All right. We'll see you tomorrow. Robert Phoenix signing off.